I got criticized a lot during the campaign for some of the, quote, outrageous things I said in my political career. One of them was I gave a speech back in, I think it was 2007, at Ave Maria University, where I talked about Satan attacking this country. You should have seen that day on the press corps. They released that statement. Oh my goodness. One after another, I'd get these wide-eyed reporters walking up to me with this, "Do you actually believe in Satan?" I'd said, "Jesus does." Yeah, I do. And if I were Satan, what country? That's what I said. If I were Satan, what country would you attack? Where would you spend your time and energy? Destroying that last best hope, right? And convincing us not to do evil. You know this. The greatest accomplishment Satan can have is not to get you to do evil. What is it? That's right. Do nothing. Lukewarmness. If you go out and speak the truth, if you go out and fight for what you know you're called to fight for, you'll have an impact. You may not see it. You may not see it in even the thing you're doing. You may lose the battle. One of the great blessings I've had in my life is that I don't care if I lose. Because I've learned through so many incredible moments that loss in my eyes is not necessarily the same thing as a loss in his. I look back at my presidential campaign and say, you know, well, we lost. I hear, oh, sorry you lost. I wish I would have won. We'd had a very different campaign last November. But I did what I thought I was called to do. Karen and I, let me assure you, Karen did not want to do this. She fought it. I'll never forget when I came to her and I said, you know, I think I'm getting the call to do this. Because I'd been out, you know, doing speeches and stuff. And I said, we need to pray about that. And first thing she said was, well, I don't want to do it. I said, no, I understand that. I knew that. I said, well, we need to pray about it. And she said, no. Now, my wife is a prayer. She said, God could not possibly want you to do this. We've been there. He's put, you know, we've been through this race and that, and he can't want you to do this. And so she was the last one. She was the last person that, before I decided to pull the trigger on this, she finally confided in me that she had known all along this was what I wanted to do, but she didn't want to do it. She was also the last person I had to convince to drop out of the race because she didn't want to do that either. Who knows how God's going to motivate you? Who knows what's going to be the result? I'll share one with you. This is sort of one of my favorite stories in the campaign. It was after the Missouri, Minnesota, and Colorado primaries. And we won all three, and as a result, became the principal contender. And so, of course, the media, as I mentioned before, just descended upon us. The Satan thing, all these other things that I had said throughout the course of my career. And of course, the media is just hammering away at it. And I'll share with you an article written by a guy named Joe Klein. I don't know if you know the name Joe Klein. Well, obviously you do know Joe Klein. For those of you who don't, all I need to say is he used to write for The New Yorker, he now writes for Time, and he's always on MSNBC. Okay, that sort of sums it up. And he wrote this article I just want to share with you in closing. Because I want you to think about, as you engage whatever level You're being called to engage, not to be dissuaded by failure, because you never know who you're impacting. The article is entitled, this was in Time magazine, Rick Santorum's Inconvenient Truths. Bob Schieffer of CBS News is the gold standard for sane and solid in American TV journalism. This is Joe Klein, not me saying this. And on the morning of February 19th, almost a year ago, he was clearly nonplussed by extreme comments Rick Santorum had made about prenatal testing. Quote, ends up in more abortions, end quote. Public schools, quote, anachronistic, end quote. And the president's position on the environment, which I called a phony theology. Schieffer began, quote, so, Senator, I've got to ask you, what in the world are you talking about, sir? Fair and balanced. At such a moment, the overwhelming majority of American politicians would go on the defensive, hem and haw, and respond with, what I really meant to say was, but not Santorum. He didn't seem flustered at all. He vigorously restated the positions he had taken, in some cases eloquently. He was especially vigorous on the subject of prenatal testing, citing studies that show that 90% of Down syndrome children are aborted. Schieffer asked whether Santorum wanted to turn back the clock on science and ban such testing. No, Santorum replied, but the federal government, through Obamacare, should not be paying for procedures like amniocentesis, which are used for the purpose of identifying children who are disabled and in most cases end up eliminating them by abortion, end quote. Santorum has become the inconvenient candidate, even for those who agree with him. These are delicate issues to be handled delicately. The Right to Life movement has been particularly clever and disciplined, changing public opinion about abortion over the past 20 years. It's gone after the most egregious and grisly outliers like so-called partial birth abortion. It's gotten a major boost from science, ironically, as sonograms have made it impossible to deny that from a very early stage, that thing in the womb is a human life. As a result, the split on those who identify themselves as pro-life and pro-choice has changed from a 56-33 majority in 1995 pro-choice to a tie today. He goes on and rips me for my Satan speech. And then he says, when you leave Satan aside, there's something admirable about Santorum's near Tourettic insistence on bringing up issues no one else wants to talk about. His position on education, that parents need to spend more time supervising their children, draws stifled groans from overworked parents. But he's right. Parents know best how their children learn. His emphasis on the importance of intact families is undoubtedly correct as well. Every major study since the 60s has shown the disaster, the results of out-of-wedlock births. Even Santorum's use of prenatal testing raises uncomfortable issues for many people. It was a sonogram that helped determine that the Santorum son, Gabriel, needed microsurgery in their womb to clear his bladder. Rick and Karen decided to fight for Gabriel's life, which nearly cost Karen her own. And they passionately embraced the child during his 2 hours of life on earth. They spent the past 3 years caring for their daughter, Isabella, whose genetic defect, trisomy 18, is an early death sentence. Almost 100% of trisomy 18 children are encouraged to be aborted. He finishes with this. He says, I am haunted by the smiling photos I've seen of Isabella with her father and mother, brothers and sisters. No doubt she struggles through many of her days. She nearly died a few weeks ago. But she's also been granted 3 years of unconditional love, the ability to smile and bring joy. Her 10-year survival has given her family a deeper sense of how precious even the frailest of lives are. All right, I can hear you saying the Santorum's family may have taken an admirable course, but shouldn't we all have the right to make our own choices? Yes, I suppose. But I also worry that we become too averse to personal inconvenience as a society, and that we are less rigorous as we should be, that we farmed out our responsibilities, especially for the disabled, to the state. And so I'm grateful to Santorum for forcing upon me the discomfort of having to think about the moral implications of his daughter's smile. They hunger for the truth. They hunger for the truth. Even when they reject it, they see it, but they can't sometimes bring themselves to it. Don't be discouraged. Don't be discouraged. Our founders knew that establishing freedom would be the easy part. Maintaining it would be the hard part over generations. The greatest generation, so to speak, was the greatest generation not because they were braver than you, smarter than you, more virtuous than you. The greatest generation was great because the challenge that faced them was great, and they met it. I would make the argument this is as great a challenge, not from the standpoint of having to sacrifice your lives in front of bullets and tanks, but it's a great challenge for the very soul of our country. Do not lose hope. Do not be faint of heart. Feel blessed to be here at a time when your country needs you. Thank you and God bless.